Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Entrepreneurship Club Kickoff meeting. Everybody, thank you. Thank you, guys. This is for you. Thank you, everybody. This is the first time we have an Entrepreneurship Club on campus, and we were thinking what a better way to start than with these three amazing guests and our amazing students. So I'm very, very honored that you're all here. My name is Loredana Padurean. I'm a professor of operations and entrepreneurship. Some of you have been my students, some of you will be, so buckle up. Today we will have, let me put this here. Today we will start with a series of talks from our amazing guests. We have Dr. James Mueller, Nobel Prize winner for Peace in 1984. Aman Advani, President of Ministry of Supply. And Daniel Bloom, VFA Fellow. And I see some people are still joining us. So we will start with their talk. Each of the speakers will tell us a little bit about their entrepreneurial journey. They all have amazing stories that I hope you can relate to. And after their introduction, we will open the floor to questions and answers. I know a lot of you have many, many questions. We talked about these cases in my class. You also have the bio of the speakers. I'm not going to go through the bios. Dr. Mueller's resume, it's 42 pages long. So unless we're going to do that for the whole duration of this talk, we cannot really say how amazing he is. The topic of our event is creating and sustaining a culture of entrepreneurship on campus. And the reason why I was thinking about this topic is because I feel before we talk about starting a business, before we talk about writing a business plan, before we talk about creating an entrepreneurship presence on campus, we have to build a culture. And today I would like you to reflect on that and maybe ask our guest questions on what does it exactly mean to be an entrepreneur? What does it take? What do we need to do here at Lasell College to become entrepreneurs? Just so you know, we have a surprise performance after the talk. To our guests, to our students, we'll have a surprise for you, and then we will have food from Blue Ribbon Barbecue. Woohoo! I know. I promised you good food if you come. So to be honest, there are two reasons why they're here: barbecue and you guys. All right. Before I move forward, this event could not have happened without two amazing people. Jordan Dalpy, please stand up. You are the heart. You are the heart of this event. And Jennifer, do not run, because you're one of them too, honey. Thank you so much for helping with this. The great job of being a professor, you just tell students what to do and they do it and they make you look really good. Also I want to thank a lot Professor Nancy Waldron, who's there in the back, the best boss on campus, and actually in the city, what the heck. Thank you for your help. I want to thank the alumni office for being here, and thank you for your help trying to get us some financial support for this event. And not last, I want to thank the president of the Entrepreneurship Club, Rocky. And all the members of the Entrepreneurship Club, please stand up. These guys were amazing helping us with the event. Thank you, guys. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, so allow me to introduce Steve Bloom. I'm sorry. His father is Steve Bloom. Did you know that? Daniel Bloom, his father is Steve Bloom. It just happened to be a coincidence. So I'm trying to find the best speaker in the country. Then I happened to stumble upon Dan, and then he tells me, well, my father is actually Steve Bloom from Lasell College. It's like, well, I guess it's an awesome family. That's all I can say. So Venture for America, for those of you who do not know, offers what I like to call moral entrepreneurship MBA. And Dan is going to tell us more about that. I don't want to take more of his time. So Dan, if you want to tell us the story of your entrepreneurial journey and amaze us. No pressure. Yeah, I know.
Can you hear me if I just speak like this? Is that good? I can take the mic. All right. Well, first of all, thank you to Loredana and to Lasell College for having me. It's great. Came in from Cincinnati, and super excited to be here. So how many of you have heard of Venture for America? Just show of hands. All right, so about half. So just a quick background on Venture for America. It's a program for recent college graduates to go work at startups in emerging cities. So places like Cincinnati, Detroit, Las Vegas, Providence, Rhode Island. Basically trying to take the funnel of talent, which generally goes right into New York, Boston, DC, San Francisco, and put it into other places around the country, into startups, into small growth companies where talent is really needed. And so the company it's a nonprofit founded by Andrew Yang, started in 2012, and I was one of the original 40 fellows to go and lead the experiment. So it's going really well, in case you're wondering. We've now grown to, I think we're in 3 more cities this past year, and now in an additional 4. And we went from 40 fellows to 70 fellows, and next year we're bringing in 100. And then the year after that, for any of you juniors, they're going to be hopefully looking to do 125, maybe 150. So I encourage you to apply. But so these are my notes. I'm not just distracted in case you were judging me. So I kind of want to just go back and tell you a little bit about my path to being in Venture for America. I majored in what all entrepreneurs should major in if they're planning to go into business, which is history. And I wrote a thesis about dance in colonial America, which obviously makes perfect sense if you want to work in business. So I wrestled in college and was an RA. Took all kinds of classes with liberal arts education, ranging from history courses to Shakespeare. Took a dance class, took a class about fairy tales. I was in a choir, and I did a drawing course as well, and some more academically rigorous courses as well. But again, all these things, actually while I was at Wesleyan, I never took a business course or a math course. Actually not taking math was part of the prerequisite for why I went to Wesleyan, hate math, which now as I reflect on that was a huge tactical error. But here I am today working at a startup, and it kind of all seems to work out. And the reason I think that is because in college, and especially in liberal arts education, you can have exposure to all different kinds of classes. I would encourage you all to do that because being an entrepreneur, at least in my experience, requires having analytical skills and bringing in different perspectives and challenging what people see as the status quo. And I don't know that, and I didn't go to business school, and I didn't go to a school, an engineering school where people are kind of on this one track. But I know that at Wesleyan, where I went to undergrad, I was interacting with different people every single day in courses that I was not an expert in, getting exposed to new things, and that certainly shaped my ability to be analytical and to listen to people's arguments and craft my own arguments. And that is totally crucial to everything that I do every single day working at a startup. So I graduated from Wesleyan, and I got my first job actually at my alma mater doing fundraising and coaching the wrestling team there. It was a really safe, cushy job, kind of 9 to 5, pretty bureaucratic working at a university, no offense, and relatively slow moving. And I remember I had this idea where I was speaking to an alumni, and they were saying, the only time you guys reach out to us is when you're asking for money. And I said, well, that's a crappy thing to say as an alumnus who's supposed to feel normal feelings about alma mater. So I went about trying to change that. So I said, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to train our student callers by we're going to implement this thing called thank you calls. So we're just going to call, we're not going to ask for any money, but the first month we're going to train these students to be on the phone, get comfortable by just thanking alumni, no asking for money. If they offer money, obviously we'll take it, but there will be no asks, just get comfortable talking to people. So we did it. I ended up begging for the complete list of donors, which meant the trustees, which we're not allowed to call. So I ended up getting reprimanded because we had students calling trustees until one of the trustees called the boss of my boss and said, hey, I just had a conversation with a student. I've never been contacted by a student because I give multi-millions of dollars a year. And because of that, I get called by staff members all the time, and all they do is talk about money. I had a student call me, and we talked about Boss Hill and reminiscing about all kinds of crazy nonsense that takes place at Wesleyan. And it was a really nice experience. And I'm proud to say that now I've moved on from Wesleyan, and they still do thank you calls. And it's a really nice thing that they had. And I never would have, at the time when I did that, I wasn't thinking like, man, I'm really entrepreneurial. I just kind of looked at something and I saw a problem, and I was like, well, how can we fix this? Because this is a ridiculous thing that alumni feel like people reach out to them in these moments. So I guess what the point I'm trying to make is that I was acting in an entrepreneurial way without even really knowing it. And so if you can recognize that as a student or as a young professional, and really see those opportunities to make improvements, that's going to be super beneficial. So I was working at Wesleyan. I heard about this guy, Andrew Yang, who's coming to town, CEO of Entrepreneurial, and I went to his talk. I heard him talk about how all the people he works with are super passionate and want to put you in startups in these emerging cities, and he was super excited, and I was super excited. I was like, yes, I want to follow this guy anywhere he's going. So I applied, and I ended up getting waitlisted. And so there's 5 steps in the application process, and it's pretty crazy. It's like 7 essays, video submission, phone interview, a bunch of other things, and then a final interview where you come to New York and you have this competition with other people. It's pretty crazy. But I got waitlisted, and so one of the lessons I learned from wrestling growing up is do what other people won't do. And so what I ended up doing is putting on my calendar, Venture for America every single Wednesday. So every Wednesday, I would send Venture for America an email and be like, hey, Dan Bloom, still really interested. Here's my updated resume. I really hope you consider me. I really want to come to the final interview. I promise you, I won't disappoint you. Did this every week, every time they got back to me saying, hey, still no space, still on the wait list, but we'll be in touch. Until Andrew Yang came back to us, just randomly, and I went and cornered him and said, hey, I'm Dan Bloom, give me a chance, I promise you won't be disappointed. Here's 10 resumes in case you lose one. And I ended up getting a phone call, got invited to come in, and I got into the fellowship. So I think that, again, being an entrepreneur, do things that other people won't do. Run through walls, stay up till midnight and send emails. When someone sends a request on the weekend, respond to them. It's not going to take up a tremendous amount of your time, but it's little things that can make a big difference. And you can start applying that to your daily practices right now as a student. Impress your professors by being prompt and always early to class. Things like that can go a really long way. So then I became a fellow. How am I doing on time here? All right. And then I became a fellow, and they take you to training camp where you're surrounded by 39 really, really smart people that have taken business classes before. And so I was pretty intimidated, but quickly came to realize that knowing some basics of business doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be a successful business person. It really does require kind of some not tangible skills. Like going to business school doesn't mean you're going to just step in and lead a big business. You got to it takes a lot of work. And so for me, I jumped in and tried to catch up with all the stuff that they knew that I didn't. So figuring out what all the different acronyms meant that I just didn't know. Actually took a lot of learning, which was unbelievable to me. And just kind of hustle. Just hustling as a business person. So I'm not technically savvy. I don't code. I don't do website design. But I certainly can learn anything you give me. And so that was kind of the mentality that I took. I ended up getting placed in Cincinnati, which has been a phenomenal experience. I recommend that every young person go to a city that's not one of the major cities. In terms of learning and opportunities for growth and really access to community and community building, you can do that. You can be a part of something in smaller cities. Whereas in Boston, New York, DC, you kind of might get lost in the shuffle a little bit, and that can be demoralizing in some ways. I see my friends working in New York who live in a shoebox and go to their same job and they're not that happy with it. They feel like there are no options because it's so competitive. And I said, well, come move out with me in Cincinnati, and you're pretty smart, you're to great school. I'll get you a job pretty easily. And actually, one of my best friends from high school just did that. He moved out to Cincinnati, he now lives with me. He's working at the fastest growing brewery in Ohio as a sales guy. So there are opportunities outside if you just think differently about where those opportunities are, and that's the goal of Venture for America. How do we get young people to stop thinking about the tracks that have been made for you, since you pretty much went to high school, where you have to, you go to high school, you get good grades, you go to a good college, and then you continue getting good grades, you do the summer internship, and then you get a great consulting gig or go to a law firm. How how do you break that? And that's what Venture America is trying to do, and that's what I'm here to kind of promote, is that there are so many jobs out there, and there are so many opportunities to learn and grow, and figure out what you want to do and what you're going to be good at, and they're off the beaten path, and so stop. I guess what I want to say is stop going to the info sessions about the law firms unless you know you want to be a lawyer and you know you want to be one of those things. If you're not sure, I would encourage you to look at alternatives like Venture America, where we're going to throw you into the fire at an early stage company and really see what you're made of for the most part. So since going to Cincinnati, I worked at one company for 18 months. It was great, learned a lot, ended up wanting something new and a little bit more challenging. So I transitioned to a new company. And now I'm actually really proud to say that I've co-founded a company that just got funding from Startup Accelerator in Detroit. My co-founder is going full time. We've got $25,000 to give it a go. It's called TurnPro. We send you GoPro cameras if you're going on a trip. You take footage all you want, send it back, and we make you a video of your experience. And we also apply that to businesses as well. So if you're trying to create video content and you have an active user base, we send you GoPros. You can use it for an event, or showing company culture, or a retreat. You send the cameras back, and we make you a custom video you can use for marketing and promotion. So that's my entrepreneurship story. I'm still figuring it out. I'm certainly not all that good at it yet, but I act like I am. It seems to work. But every day is learning, and every day is something new. So yeah, really happy to be here. Thank you.
So I'm going to keep my intro a little short, not because I don't have much to say, but because I didn't plan such great lessons like Dan did. I'll try to loop some in there as they come to my head. So my story I think starts a few years ago. So grew up in Atlanta, went to Georgia Tech for undergrad and was in industrial engineering, and a lot of the stuff that Dan said there I think was totally true in terms of how much your background limits or opens up doors in terms of what you do next. So on a very similar note, went into a world that wasn't a direct application of my undergraduate degree. I started doing some consulting at a strategy and operations firm based in Atlanta, but traveling every day. So I'd leave Monday morning, I'd get on a plane, I'd fly out to a client site, and this was every Monday for about 175 weeks straight, getting on a plane Monday morning, coming back Thursday night. And so it does get a bit monotonous, except for the fact that the work, when you get there, does change. So for me, and just kind of thinking about how I went from where you're sitting now to starting a company, the biggest catalyst, and sometimes you'll hear this both ways, was thinking about the problems in my life that really needed fixing. And as someone who was on the plane that often, anything that we face today with our apparel was amplified times 100 when you're traveling and you're living out of a suitcase half of your life. So for me, I think my favorite story to tell in terms of leaving the theory stage and entering the actual practice was that, while I was in consulting about halfway through, I used to have this feeling every day where I'd get home from work at 9 o'clock at night after a long day at a client site, and I'd probably opt out of going out to a client dinner at that point, or going to the gym, or even going out to a bar with friends. That I'd much rather just go back to my hotel room. And the first thing I would do is peel these, gross dress socks off. I'm sorry for being so graphic about it, but these things are just, everyone's been there at some point where it's just kind of these dress socks that aren't made for a 16-hour day. They're barely made for an hour of an entrepreneurship meeting. So you'd want to get rid of these things as quickly as you could, and you get home, and it was this emotion that I just wanted to battle against. Having the socks on, or going to work and worrying about sweat stains when I was up in front of a group, presenting something. So it was all these kind of raw emotions that I took and channeled and said, okay, how can we start to fix that? So that's kind of where my story starts in terms of Ministry Supply, which we'll get to. I used to take my favorite socks. Well, first I used to Google dry fit dress socks 100 times over, and it turns out they don't exist. And so what I would do then is I would cut out my dry fit socks, and I would cut out my dress socks, and I would just go to a simple home sewing machine, sew the two together, and I'd come into work the next day. No one would know, and if they did, they'd probably have gracefully released me. But I'd nerd out to my friends that didn't have that power. I'd show them and kind of get pumped about the fact that I'd solved this problem with upwards of half an hour of problem solving, taken fashion and function and blended them together. So I started wearing these socks to work every day for the next year probably, and it's a marginal improvement upon where I was. But after that, after a little while of consulting, kind of getting a bit monotonous, you can imagine, left to go to Southern Africa, a country called Swaziland, and did some nonprofit consulting there for a little bit less than a year, where it was another operational challenge. So while I was at Deloitte, I was working on operational strategies and kind of taking that same mindset to Swaziland, where again, the problem is once again amplified in the fact that the climate there is going from 95 degrees outside, and you come inside and it's this massively AC'd office where you're sweating and then you're freezing and you're going back and forth constantly. And certainly a phenomenon that we all feel here. So in terms of how that started leading me to the next step, so I left there, in 2011 to go to business school at MIT, where I'll quickly end that story quickly and say that I did drop out of MIT after a year. So I can claim the MBA and I can claim the dropout, which pleases both sides of the argument. So I went to school there, and that's where I met up with a couple other folks who were equally excited and equally pursuing this path of fashion and function. So I guess it's probably a good time to introduce our company, Ministry Supply. So we started in 2011 on a mission to do exactly what I just described: remove those moments in your life where you feel limited by the apparel you're wearing, or you feel limited by not even in just the apparel, but how you feel or how you look. That if we can take down those barriers, we can actually allow people to reach a greater potential. That at 9 o'clock on a Monday night or on a Wednesday night before I fly out the next day, I might go watch Monday Night Football instead of heading back to my hotel room. So it was this idea of how do we bring that to life. So we met in 2011, about 2.5 years ago now. And since then have really built out the entire men's wardrobe. So dress shirts, slacks, socks. We just started doing jackets. A prototype just came in this morning, actually really excited. So kind of thinking about how can we build the men's wardrobe to take down those barriers. And we approach it from a very engineering mindset, given that we're all engineers and a sprinkle of fashion designers in there too. Where we think about, what are the actual problems that you face every day. So whether it be temperature regulation, whether it be moisture regulation, whether it be odor control, how do we take a combination of existing technologies and new technologies that we can, blend in together and bring to life. So one of the examples that I just mentioned was this oscillating temperature between really hot and really cold. In that case, we take what's called a phase change material, which is basically a wax almost. It's brought to life through NASA that melts or freezes at your skin temperature. And what we do is we take that and we embed it within a polyester fiber, and then we blend that into our shirts. So it has the effect of pulling energy or releasing energy to keep you about a 2-degree thermal capacity, cooler or warmer as you go through your day. So the idea is by taking technology like that, in that case technology that actually already exists, and creating a new application of it, we can kind of change the way that clothing is designed, where instead of going into a dark room and designing, we're talking to customers, figuring out what the issues are, and bringing them to more of a lab than a studio. So that's really where the story ends, and that's what brings us to today. We're based out of Boston, so while I agree with the small market, I would also encourage you to check out large markets. Come by our labs are in right by South Station, so if anyone's ever in the area, we're at 105 South Street. Come by and say hello. We've got about 10 people on staff full time now, and it is really a total balance between people who are entrenched in the fashion world and people who have material science degrees or hardcore engineering backgrounds. So it's really bringing the two of those together. I think the only thing I'll close on by saying is it's really exciting to see. I think this is the first meeting of the Entrepreneurship Club. Is that right? So it's fascinating to see this many people here. And I think one of the things that may not have come alive in the story I just told is how impactful Boston's ecosystem was, or an ecosystem like Venture for America is, to creating, to validating. I think when I was growing up in Atlanta and I would show friends these socks, most of them would say, that's pretty cool, there's the trash can. So it was this idea that it wasn't fostered. And the second I came to Boston, a culture that had really this entrepreneurial ecosystem alive through clubs like this, that it was the first time I felt validated to be doing something different and something new. So my only statement here is to say, keep doing this. I think this is absolutely fantastic that people are here and people are engaged, and there's certainly places you could have been other than here today. In fact, I saw a few brochures outside the door. So good job on picking this place to be, because if this is something that you're interested in, this is the first step. And while every single panel you go to and every single talk you go to may not be that beneficial, it's all of those coming together, and it's this ecosystem that you can build that allows you to validate your idea and bring it to life through probably the people around you that may eventually be your co-founders. So looking forward to some questions that come out later. My advice on questions is ask the hardest question you can think of. The worst that can happen is that we don't give an answer. So find the one that feels almost awkward to ask, and that's the perfect question. So looking forward to some fastballs later in this talk. Thanks a lot.
I start. Okay, well, can you hear me from this? Yeah. So I'm a little farther down the road of entrepreneurship than my colleagues here, and I have, because I've been at it longer, I have more failures to report. So being an entrepreneur, I heard it once, maybe you've heard this definition, an entrepreneur is someone who wants to do something for which they don't have the resources. So you've got an idea, you want to solve, as Dan was saying, you want to solve a problem, you solve that problem with the alumni, you're solving the problem with men's apparel. And by the way, I told you I just finished an 18-day road trip. I took 18 days worth of undershirts and clothing, and I would have rather taken 2.
We'll drop some in the mail.
Okay, good. So entrepreneurs solve problems, and I know when I look out at you and see the energy and interest that you have, I'm sure you've each got problems on your mind that you'd like to solve. And I put it in 2 categories. You can try to fix something in the world, and that would be what I've spent a lot of my time doing. I'm a cardiologist, I work against heart attacks. Or you can try to improve the world, and something that's not broken, but elevate the quality of human life. And I put my daughter in that, who works in the fashion industry, as you know. So there are a bunch of things that the world needs, both fixing and enhancing life. And I think the best way to approach this is through entrepreneurship for new solutions. So now let me tell you about 3 problems that I've been privileged to work on. One was, I wish it were not so timely, the nuclear arms race. And the second was the sexual abuse of children by Catholic priests. And the third is heart attacks. So these are all giant beasts, and I've been able to spend a lot of my life trying to work on those problems. The first one, the nuclear arms race, for which the Nobel Peace Prize was given, started in kind of an unusual way. I was a student like you at college. I studied Russian, 4 years of Russian. Because the teacher kept giving A's. And it was just doing great things for my resume to get into medical school. When I got to med school at Johns Hopkins, I heard a doctor talk about his trip to Russia. And afterwards I said, I've got some free time, I'd like to go live in another culture. And I suggest that for all of you at some point. And he said, well, maybe I'd like to go to Russia. So he said, you can go to Russia. So I became the first medical exchange student to Moscow in 1967. This is during the Vietnam War. I was an American in Moscow. And it was very unusual, but I was treated quite well. The medical students basically wanted to treat patients. The doctors wanted more money for their hospitals. They didn't want more weapons. So when I went back after that experience, and in 1980, I heard Russia and the U.S. talking about fighting a war, which would, of course, become a nuclear war, with 20,000 weapons aimed on each side. I went to a friend of mine and I said, those Russian doctors don't want a war any more than we do. So maybe we can join with them and fight nuclear weapons in both countries. So we united with Brezhnev's doctor, and we began to work against nuclear weapons. Problem I was a young faculty member at the Brigham Hospital at Harvard, and my boss says, Jim, you're wandering around the world trying to prevent a nuclear war. I'm paying you a salary to write manuscripts. Where's the manuscript? And I said, well, I'm working on it. This is a professor at Harvard, a very famous man. He said, no, you're not. He said, I saw you. You were on the Today Show this morning. You were in New York this morning, and you were debating at General about the arms race. And I said, well, yes, I was. And he said, well, you're not doing your job. This is often a problem for an entrepreneur, is that you're a little off-center where your support's coming from. And I said, well, Dr. Gronwald, I said, I'm trying to prevent a nuclear war. And he's a very funny guy, very good man. He says, oh, that's what you're doing. You're trying to prevent a nuclear war, are you? He said, well, we haven't had one. He said, it's working. And he said, please get back to work and write the manuscript. So I wrote the manuscript. The group grew to 160,000 members, physicians in 60 nations, and it was given the Nobel Prize in '85 in Oslo for spreading the truth that you could not fight a nuclear war. And just to bring this fast forward, now we've got the Ukraine, which is a mess. We've got Russian troops threatening to go in there. We've got NATO exercising. We've got Russian planes buzzing American fighters. What I hope is that what we were trying to teach is that nuclear powers cannot go to war, is embedded deeply enough that that will prevent that from happening. So that was entrepreneurship in a social sense. I had to quit in '84 because I would have been fired and divorced and completely estranged from my children. So those kinds of problems happen in entrepreneurship activities, and you often have to balance personal relationships in your job. The next thing that happened was, I'll just mention this briefly, was we live very close to the college. Those of you that go to the soccer field on Studio Road have seen me taking my trash out. So we moved here about 12 years ago. And it was right when cardinal law was seen to be taking priests who had abused children and moving them from one church to another. I was raised Catholic, and a lot of that teaching has been important to me, and I was horrified to see that going on. So we formed a group called Voice of the Faithful, and it grew to 30,000 members. That was an entrepreneurial thing. We had to raise money to get it going. And I was the president of that for a year, and then someone said that I was going to be assassinated. And I thought, I'm not sure I need this. Why don't I go back and prevent heart attacks? No one's going to assassinate you for that. So I left that entrepreneurial activity and got onto my main job. So the final entrepreneurial activity I had is that there was a need for a better way to prevent heart attacks. You probably all know somebody that's suffering from heart disease. The problem is cholesterol plaques that rupture, and current diagnostic methods can't tell cholesterol from anything else. So we tried to build a tool to tell the cholesterol plaques from the collagen plaques, and that required building a catheter that goes in the leg into the coronary artery. So I founded this company in 1999. I was a professor of medicine, and I knew nothing about business. But I knew we wanted this catheter. I raised $600,000 from my patients. We got started. We burned through that money before we knew it. We raised another $3 or $4 million. We still couldn't get it to work, even in autopsy specimens. And the company went within 3 days of being bankrupt. And I flew out to California, presented to a venture capitalist, and I knew it was our last chance, that we had 3 days' money left. And in the middle of my presentation, he fell asleep. So I thought, we're done, And then he woke up and he said, I like this idea. And he said, we're going to invest in your company, but we're going to take all of the stock you gave to everybody else and your own stock, and it's going to be worthless. And so that's what happened. But he kept the venture going. And when you're starting a venture, you basically have to decide, do you want to own it all yourself, or do you want to give half of it to a partner? Or do you want to give a quarter of it to 4 partners? And my suggestion is it's better to get the team together. It's better to own a smaller slice of a bigger pie. But that's a key issue that will come up in every entrepreneurial activity. So we were happy to be able to continue working with his money. That was over 12 years ago. I have a reprint of that hard time that those of you can see. And since then, it's required us an MIT engineer and 100 engineers to build this device. It makes 30,000 chemical measurements in the heart. But we have raised now $155 million. We lose money every year. Last year, we spent $20 million, and we brought in $3 million. This year, we're going to spend $30 million, and we'll bring in $8 million. If we're successful, and the catheters used in every stent case, the revenue will be $3 billion. So this is a gigantic bet by the investors that this device will work. It's gone through a 15-year cash-losing period before it's has a chance to succeed. Now, how are we doing? The device is used in 8,000 patients. I just came back from Japan, where I spent 8 of the 18 days, and the Japanese doctors want to use the device. It's almost approved there. It's used in 100 hospitals around the world. We've set up the science to prove that the device can actually find the plaques that cause heart attacks. And those trials might have a result next year. So if we can survive and get to next year and get the science back that shows that this really is a solution, then the entrepreneurial activity will be successful, because there are plenty of treatments. Heart disease is different than Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's is easy to diagnose and impossible to treat. Heart disease is hard to diagnose, comes suddenly, and easy to treat because there's stents, there's statins, there's all kinds of ways to treat it. So it's a diagnostic problem. And we think we've got the solution to that, but we're still not there. Just like the problems that we face. This morning I interviewed a marketing person, a woman who might help us with marketing, because we're not getting our message out to the doctors very well. And we run out of money next year, so we need to raise more money, but our investors are tired. They've said this has taken too long, and so we're going to sell stock to the public. So we're going to have an IPO, probably. We're being audited now, so our books are right, and we'll be ready to launch the company as a public company if the stock market is right, maybe at the end of this year after we start in the Japanese market. So I greatly enjoyed the work I did in the hospitals. I worked there for 30 years. But I also enjoy this entrepreneurial business work. It's very, very interesting. And it's got many complicated parts to it that there's a similarity between the businesses you talked about and how you're getting this new type of apparel developed. We're trying to do a new device. Underneath it all, you've got to have a real problem, and you've got to have the right solution. That's the way to start an entrepreneurial activity. Once you've got those two, that's like the foundation. Then you need resources, people, money, time, talent, experience. All of those come into play later. That's the blocking and tackling. But underneath it, you've got to have a real problem and a real solution. Thank you.
So I'm going to open the floor to questions, but before I do that, I just want to tell you that there's a reason why these 3 guests are here, and the reason is students. So I met Aman because of a student from MIT. I met Daniel because of a student who's helping me doing some work for my research project. Dr. Muller is here because of a student. Tyler, where are you? Hi, Tyler. So Tyler sends me a text at midnight. He's like, hey, you said that you want to have a guest to your entrepreneurship event. So I met this very nice gentleman on the plane. Would you be okay if we invite him to the club? It's like, okay, who's this gentleman? It's like, oh, Dr. Muller. That's what he said. It's like Obama or Dr. Muller. I mean, I guess I should know right away. So I Googled Dr. Muller, and then I Googled again, and then I Googled again, because the only Dr. Muller that kept coming up was this Dr. Muller. And I went back to Tyler and said, is this Dr. Muller the one that you met on the plane? He's like, yeah, he's a very nice gentleman, and he said he would be so happy to come to our talk. It's like, okay, so that's entrepreneurial spirit. And again, the way I've met Dan was through a student who learned about Venture for America, and she said, I think this would be a great case. Do you want to talk about it? And that's how we met. And we are writing a case study about Venture for America, and we are also writing a case about Ministry of Supply, again, because the student said, you know what, there's this coolest company ever. One of our students, by the way, is wearing one of the shirts. Great way to make yourself noticed, Sean, over there. Are you trying to get a job with Ministry of Supply, maybe? Oh, we'll see. Okay.
We'll talk after.
We'll talk after. Speaking of talking after, if you go around if you look around the room, you see a lot of very interesting posters. These are business ideas that my students in Entrepreneurship 101 are working on. So we were trying very hard to communicate everything that a business plan should communicate in one poster. Now, that's not an easy task, but this is what the students were trying to achieve. So after this talk, I encourage you to spend some time, talk to the future entrepreneurs. I'm sure there's some millionaires in this room. By the way, 7% of every business you see on this wall has to be mine. I forgot to ask you to sign that deal, but yeah, absolutely, I told you so. All right, so how about we open the floor to some questions to our speakers here. Anybody wants to start? All right.
I mean, this is kind of a question for all of you, but what would you say is like your biggest X factor that got you to where you are today as like success?
So the question is, what's your X factor? Do you know what X factor is? Dan?
You go first.
I guess I would say persistence. There's gonna be a lot of people that say no in your life, or what you can't do, or why you can't do it, and just ignoring them and keep going. I think it's certainly why I am today.
Yeah, I'd probably actually agree in a couple different manifestations for us, but there's some element of luck, but I think luck comes with putting yourself in the right place at the right time. So I'd say for us, the X factor has just been the same persistence or perseverance. Where a couple examples I give of that for us have been we came together at my first year of business school, where I was an engineer who was pretty excited about changing fashion, and who knew there were going to be two other people there that had the exact same idea and were equally excited about it, that we could join up together and do this. And I think there's no way that, and Dr. Muller put it best, I'd much rather have a smaller piece of a bigger pie. That it was a no-brainer when we joined in together. But it worked out well because we were all putting ourselves at the Entrepreneurship Center. We were all putting ourselves in that ecosystem, so we actually found each other. Another example of that would be Kickstarter. Kickstarter today is very different than it was when we launched our product on it 2 years ago. Where it was the perfect timing for us, where it was an audience that was very captive. We set a goal and we reached our goal and we were really excited about it. But we kind of stumbled upon Kickstarter, but by being in that ecosystem, we had 12 people tell us, hey, Kickstarter is perfect for what you're trying to do. Why don't you launch on Kickstarter? So I think it's by consistently putting yourself in the right position, by coming to something like this, you'll find that you'll make your own luck in a way.
So I would say the key to success is the response to failure. Everything I've succeeded in, I've failed first. And so those of you that have tried something and it doesn't work, you have to make sure it's worth doing. But if you think you're right, you have to get yourself up and try again. You mentioned I have a long resume. I've published lots of manuscripts. Almost all my manuscripts have been rejected the first time around. And you have to revise them and find out why they're getting rejected and keep going. The peace movement we tried to start between Russian and U.S. doctors 3 or 4 times before it started. And our company is 15 years of failure. We try to build a catheter one way, that doesn't work. Then we try to build it another way. I guess it was Edison who said that every time he failed, he had eliminated one more possible solution. So that to me is the key ingredient, is what do you do when you fail?
I have a question for Daniel Bloom. Pertaining to the interview process, like what problem did you have to solve?
When you say problems, do you consider Yeah, so the interview process for Venture for America, they gave you different business cases. So there were also on the day of the final selection, you're broken off into teams and you're doing different challenges like giving straws and tape. You have to build the highest structure you can that holds a tennis ball. So, that answer your question?
So for those of you who don't know, applying for Venture for America is a very interesting, challenging process. You go through a boot camp, right? You're pretty much exposed to a series of very interesting judges, right? I'm trying very hard to become one of your judges because I think I have what it takes based on students' feedback.
It's actually one of the scariest experiences ever.
Yeah. So maybe you want to talk more about the scariest, because so far I'm the scariest experience on campus, and I'm trying to tell them that there's something worse out there, and trust me, if you make it through my scariest experience, there's another one.
There are pretty scary people out there, and Venture America does a pretty good job of finding them. And they sit them down across the table from you while you're doing all of these exercises, and they actually tell the judges that to be just cruel. For the most part.
Just be natural, right? For those who are naturally cruel, just be natural. That's what we've been told.
But it's very interesting because they're trying to put pressure on you and back you into a corner and see how you react. And I probably shouldn't tell you that it's wrong kids will find out that knowledge, which is not fair. But anyway, but they actually give you different business tasks or challenges to build structures, and then as soon as you're done, they say time's up, and then they say, Mr. Bloom, who would you not like to work with again in this group? And you're sitting there with 5 people you just worked with to solve this problem. You're like, it's him? like, why? And so then they make you back it up, and it is a fascinating process. And I don't want to say exactly what they're looking for, because that would be way special sauce, but it's a really interesting way of solving problems and then having them question every move that you're making. But that's what being in a business is like. You want to have people question every move you make, because that's, again, going to help figure out where the failures are faster, and then get to the right solution.
So the medical school had an interviewer who nailed the window shut, and then he would ask the medical student applicants to go open the window. And the one that made the greatest impression was the one that threw the chair through the window.
How we doing, gentlemen? My question to you guys was, as you've gone through like the process of actually starting your businesses, what have you done to kind of combat like growing pains? Like, how have you kind of, like dealt with that?
I'll jump in there. It's something that we definitely face pretty frequently. We growing fast from an employee standpoint, that faster than maybe we even preferred, but having needs, we went from 3 people to 10 people, which in the scheme of things doesn't seem like much, but on a day-to-day basis feels like a lot. That maintaining the right culture as you grow has been one of our biggest challenges. I think for us, what it comes back to, and we kind of consistently come back to this, is that if anyone gets a chance to check out this TED Talk by a guy named Simon Sinek, that if you Google it, it's called Start With Why. But go check it out, or maybe we can share the link afterwards. But his point during the entire thing is what separates Apple from Dell, or what separates people like Martin Luther King or the Wright brothers, is this idea of starting with why, and it's ultimately coming back to what your mission is in the first place. And so, if everything centers back to the why, in our case, achieving that limitless potential I described earlier by not having clothing be a barrier. If everything comes back to that, that's what you can unite and centralize around, so that you can come back, you can get over growing pains by refocusing on why you're there in the first place. I think the alternative to that he presents is if you're always focused on the what, which should be kind of the next thought, you're going to be tied to performance. So when you're performing well, you're happy. When you're performing poorly, you're sad. And as you grow, people aren't necessarily all excited about the exact same thing. So by bringing it back down to what your mission is, what your ultimate goal is, you unite everybody around the same values, the same mission, and you get everybody on the same page from day one, so that as you grow, it's the same question about how you would scale your business is how you would scale your team.
I might comment on growing pains. It's a great question. We went from a science project into a commercial company, and there's a lot of change there. As scientists, you want to be open to all kinds of possibilities. A commercial company, you've got to be focused on this is the product, this is the sales cost, and as you make that transition, the culture has to change. The culture goes from one of we're all in this together. Early in a startup, maybe you have startups here where you're the only person. You have to do everything. As you get a little bigger, you have 2 or 3 people, and you start subdividing. So you wear a lot of hats at the beginning, and then you have to get rid of those hats as you go on. For me, the hardest thing was that I was the CEO of the company until it had 90 employees. But then it became time to commercialize. So we needed somebody that knew business. I didn't know business. So I had to not become the CEO. I had to become the medical officer. And we now have a real, as the venture capitalist said, time for a real CEO, Jim. And so we have a real CEO, a guy who's done business before. So he is the one everyone looks to. But they used to look to me. So generally, you have to get the founder out of the way for a business to succeed. But I knew that, so I got myself out of the way. And I said, Don, I'll do the medical science stuff. Everything else, I'm out of your way. So I made a conscious effort to let the growing pain from a science base to a real commercial company occur. It's not been easy because I enjoyed being the CEO.
Hi, I have a question for Aman. Yesterday I went into your website and I looked at like where do you have like your clothes and everything, and I saw that you only have like your clothes in a store. So my question is, do you plan on like mass producing it and like going into like big department stores or something like?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think it's actually kind of goes back to the growing pains question of as you start to scale out, there are a number of different ways you can grow, whether it's through expanding your customer base, whether it's through expanding your channels like you're mentioning, or through expanding geographies, or a number of different dimensions you can grow upon. Channels is a really good question for us, where and it probably comes back to a lesson that we've certainly come away with, which is when you're creating a company and you're creating a brand, you're creating this culture that Dr. Muller just mentioned. It's all about crystallizing that before you reach too far. So for us, the last 2 years has certainly been about perfecting the product and getting the team ready to scale. But more than anything, it's about crystallizing the brand identity and making sure that we're all telling the exact same story in the exact same way, and the brand comes off as this cohesive and really well thought out idea. It's going from that really wide vision down to this very tangible brand identity that's really important for us. So we just now feel like we're at the point where we're ready to now share that with we can share it from day one from our own site because we get to tell the story. But when you go through somebody like a third party, like Zappos or Nordstrom, that they tell your story for you, and so the only way they're going to be able to tell your story for you is if you have your story done so well that it's easy to communicate in the length of a line. So that's the challenge that we just have gotten over. In fact, the new site is the first time we really feel like we're not qualifying everything we say by can't wait till you like our site, check out our new site in a couple months. But we don't have to say that anymore because we now feel like we're cohesive, and so that's the exact time where we think it's time to share it and let other people tell our story through other channels.
If you share a product too early, you can do yourself a lot of damage. We put our hospital in products 3 years ago when it had some reliability problems. It wasn't life-threatening for the patient; it just wouldn't get the right diagnosis, and something else would be used. But if your clothing is not quite ready and Nordstrom says we're going to run it, and then you get in there and people find problems, that's much worse than delaying 6 months until you've got the product where you want it to be.
That's exactly right, yeah.
In the company that I was working with a few months ago, we won this big award for this great new HR technology. Got to go talk at a conference, and our CEO kind of publicized it a lot. And on the back end, we hadn't really finished the dashboards or the things that were going to really make this thing valuable. We had this great idea and it looked awesome, but it hadn't really been proven. And so when we went and spoke at this conference, there were all these signups afterwards, and we were just like, ugh, crap, we probably should have thanked them and delayed, finished the product, and then accepted it maybe next year when we were fully ready. So I certainly think that there's a lot of learning that can go on there.
The flip side of what all three of us just said is don't wait too long. I think that's something that we could talk about separately, but this idea that sometimes it's good to get your product on the market early, but in the right capacity, so you can get that feedback and iterate the product quickly. But I think what we're all talking about here is when you do your full-scale launch and when you put it into other people's hands to tell your story, or when you're getting judged by the people that could make or break you, like in the case of Nordstrom, that we wait till we're absolutely ready to do that and then pull the trigger.
This is also a question for you. What are the biggest problems you faced when combining fashion and technology?
It's a really, really good question to ask. I'll try to keep this short because it's one of my favorite topics, and it's one of the biggest challenges we've faced. But we like to think of ourselves, and perhaps a bit arrogantly, as creating a market, whereas we call it performance professional, a market that never existed before. So what happens there is that you're not only creating a new product like you would if, let's say, you were creating a better dress shirt that was better fitting. There's a lot of these custom fit companies out there which are fantastic. Instead of taking a share from the traditional dress shirt market, by creating a new market, you run into a lot of different challenges. So starting with investors, which we've all three talked about a little bit, you're trying to find an investment base that's never invested in performance professional before because it didn't exist. You're trying to find employees. So our customer service rep worked at Lululemon and J. Crew, and it's really nice because she's gotten performance and professional in her background, but that's pretty rare. So you're trying to find employees that have experience in performance professional, but that didn't exist, so how could they? You're trying to find manufacturers. You're either going to a traditional dress shirt manufacturer, or you're going to a swimwear manufacturer that knows how to work with knits really well. But the knitwear guy is going to be terrible at making dress shirts, and the dress shirt guy is going to be terrible at making knitwear, so all of a sudden you're stuck in between again. So we could go on and on to suppliers, manufacturers. We're talking about employees, investors. We're talking about Nordstrom. Where would Nordstrom put us, right? If we want them to put us right between Arc'teryx and Hugo Boss, we don't exactly have that leverage at the table right now, and they're mentally accounting. And the last one I'd throw out there would be customers, right? You might have a drawer for undershirts and you've got a drawer for athletic shirts. Well, if we fall in between, there's no more drawers. So it's this idea of how do you kind of constantly not just have to make a product that's better than what's out there, but also create the space to put that product in.
I admire your being between engineering and fashion. And when you ask how they fit together, how does the tide fit together at the corner of Martha's Vineyard, where you've got two massive things of water coming together? It's very turbulent. So these big advances, in my mind, come from bringing two separate disciplines together. But it's not easy because there are no career paths. And the people that want to work in interdisciplinary, they get turned about in very high-standing ways. But it's a difficult area, but that's where the progress comes from. That's where innovation comes from. That's in terms of the tides. That's where the fish are. So it's a good place to work at the interface of two disciplines, but it's not easy.
Is that really what the fish are?
Yeah, they are
Right now.
It churns up the plankton, and the little fish eat that stuff, and then the big fish comes in.
Use that.
You've got to go where the tides meet.
My question is directed to the three of you. So you have your problem, you have your solution, you're wearing all these hats. So my question is, how do you stay motivated when you feel like you're doing everything you can, but you're not making the progress that you'd hope for?
We're all looking at each other.
Yeah.
No one wants to answer.
I'll keep my answer short because I think it actually just relates back to a question we had earlier. For us particularly, we are closely linked with Zappos, and I think one of their fundamental principles is this curve of, Zappos' tagline, something like delivering happiness. And they're constantly thinking about how you keep yourselves motivated, how you keep your customers motivated. And they show this curve where it's, performance at the bottom, passion is next, and purpose is at the top, where it's, depending on where in the organization you're tied, it will keep the momentum up. So early on, I'd mentioned we were tied to performance. So we come off this great Kickstarter win. We're all excited and we're all really pumped, but then all of a sudden we are 2 months late delivering them. We're all depressed and, counting our days. But by then moving to passion, we kind of rallied ourselves when those, shirts actually came, and we rallied ourselves around how great the product was. That passion started coming through. And only in the last probably year have we really truly transitioned to purpose, which is what I was going back to when I said start with why, that a hard day versus a great day are going to be both, every week you'll face both of those. And if you kind of let yourself ride that roller coaster, it's terrifying. But if you constantly tie yourself to your greater goal and your greater mission, in our case, to change an industry that we think has been stagnant for too long, if that's what we're always pumped about, there's always something good happening. We always sold something every day. We always, had a new prototype come in. That's what we can get excited about, is that we're on track to still hit our bigger why and not constantly focused on the day-to-day what.
The first question we got into the program that Entrepreneurial asked all the fellows, had to stand up in front of everyone and said, why do you do what you do? And so that, for me, again, comes back to your why question. And so when I think about every single day when things kind of suck and you're in the weeds, and you can't really see the light at the end of the tunnel, it's, well, how do I set that small goal right in front of me that I know I'm going to nail? And I know that is tied to exactly why I do what I do every single day. And then I hit it, and I'm like, all right, that's step one. And then next thing. So there are ways of kind of getting out of that, that darkness that can sometimes come with working at a startup that seems to be running its wheels a little bit. And there are certainly, it ebbs and flows for sure. But I think for me, at least, it's goal setting, realistic goal setting, and then remembering why you do what you do, which is interesting.
So I'd echo that and say, I think Martin Luther King said, keep your eyes on the prize. And you've got to look at the long-term goal. When I worked against nuclear weapons, there was a picture of a burned child from Hiroshima that we had in our office. And we just looked at that child and we would imagine 1 million people being incinerated, and that would keep us going. When I work against heart attacks, I'm a little too far away from the problem, so I don't see patients daily, but I do try to get into hospitals periodically to see a patient, and then that gives me the energy to go back and do the difficult things that often fail, because there's a lot of failure. However, I do have to say is sometimes it's worth quitting something. There are some things where there are external forces that make it impossible for a talented person to succeed. And so that's kind of tricky, finding out when you're in that situation. Or maybe a venture is causing too much trouble in your personal life. I was in that situation with the arms race where I was doing it 80 hours a week, and it was ruining the rest of life. You have to be aware of that kind of situation. It's tricky.
Well, and actually, that's a great point of knowing when to quit. And having just recently quit a job to find a new position, I was in a situation where there was the CEO just was very controlling of all the work. He was used to being a one-man show and had a hard time delegating. And when my learning stopped, when it was clear that I was no longer able to grow as a professional and take on new challenges, that was the moment we was like, well, then I have to leave. And so I think that recognizing those moments is really, really hard, especially at a startup or in entrepreneurship when you're probably emotionally tied to whatever you're doing, to the people that you're working with. But recognizing those moments where you can be like, well, it doesn't have to be this way. There's probably great other opportunities out there. And then making that transition is also critical.
I have a question for Aman. We know that you make business wear for men. Do you have any future plans of making them for women too?
It's a good question, one that we get all too frequently. We did just accidentally mess up a batch of about 12,000 shirts that have a more feminine cut, so if you want one, more than welcome to have it. No, we don't have any immediate plans. The idea there, and I'll draw it back to the question earlier about channel expansion, is that there's a number of different ways we can expand. We talked about geography, we talked about channel, we talked about product, we talked about customer. That attacking all of these different ways for expansion would be a little bit too much for us to handle. So we've got to focus down on a couple different ways. So at this point, we feel like we know our customer. It's not only men, but it's a particular subset of men that we spend, as much time as we spend perfecting the product, we spend understanding who that guy is and exactly what he wants, and it's what feeds into the design. So it's almost to say that it would be double the work to move to women. It's not just a logical extension of taking the same research and applying it. And I think that's exactly what we're trying to steer away from, is the traditional fashion process that just says, take inspiration and build a product line. In our case, the inspiration would be engineering. But rather taking it from the standpoint of really understanding that customer base before you move into making product for them. So it's a good question. I think it's just the simple answer for us is being disciplined to focus on what we're good at and putting everything else aside, even if you see opportunities sometimes that, not taking them.
All right, so you almost just answered my question. I was going to ask, you have really done a great job at creating like the basics of business. And I was wondering if in the future, as you get more competitors, because you're branching into this great new market and there are going to be competitors coming up, do you plan to bring more design or work with maybe Pantone or different color companies and try and bring more design into your clothing?
Yeah, it's another great question. So, we started with this fundamental basic perspective on fashion, which was we're not looking to be fashion forward. We're not looking to make, that weird rat cap you see on a runway. We're looking to make the basics. We're looking to do them really well. So it's the reason I'm wearing a white dress shirt and gray slacks right now, is because that's what we're really good at, is not trying to push the envelope on fashion, but really trying to nail down exactly what the staples are. That said, we do also recognize that while we're an engineering company, a design company in the fashion space, fashion wins, and ultimately people make their decisions based on how the aesthetic looks. So certainly a direction we have to go. We just brought on both a designer and developer. So myself and Gihan, who are two of the co-founders, are the engineers, and we're super focused on making sure that everything we make is tremendously functional. We just brought on a designer and developer that our designer was the head of design for Brooks Brothers and Theory. So he's got kind of a fashion and function background, and our developer spent all of her time at Reebok for the last 10 years, and she kind of continues to reinforce this function message. So by continuing to add these variables into our team, we naturally progress towards making sure that the aesthetic is keeping up with the function. So if you look at our shirts from 2 years ago, they're so incredibly functional, but they looked terrible. And so it was just kind of figuring this out. And again, we had those meetings sitting at a venture capitalist's desk, and ours didn't turn out as well as Dr. Muller's did, where we were in some cases laughed out of the room, where it was a product that wasn't there yet. It was, we said fashion and function, but we only did function. So the short answer to your question is yes, absolutely. We'll start to expand out, but he just joined the team 7 or 8 months ago, so it'll take a full cycle before his work will start to come to life right about now.
We have a question, Alexa.
Yeah, so certainly working on events. So we're partnering with all kinds of organizations right now. We're trying to figure out where our sweet spot is. We started with a pretty broad idea, basically solving the problem of, so actually my parents went to Vietnam, and they took a crap load of pictures, and basically I remember sitting through all the pictures, literally thousands of pictures, and being like, man, technology really is better than having to sit through all these pictures. Like, what if they just had camera with them, and they could have had video in 3 minutes, told this amazing story of their trip. That's kind of where the idea came from. And there's a company called Weddit that does this for wedding videos, where they send a couple cameras to someone having a wedding. You give them to your friends, everyone takes a video, and then you send them back and make a wedding video. Way more cost effective than hiring a full-time videographer. Really disruptive, great business. So we kind of took that model and mashed it together with the availability of GoPros, and are trying to figure out what exactly our market is. We've been going through really calculated experiments with individuals and businesses, and then with also events. So like we just did, I don't know if you've heard of the Cupid Undie Run. It's this hilarious event that takes place on Valentine's Day every year, where people wear just their underwear, and they go for a 1 mile run to raise money for cancer. And it's a big party, and we made a video. We kind of strapped GoPros to 10 people and made a great marketing video for them. Said, hey, come help us next year, raise money for this great cause. And we thought this really cool event. So we're experimenting with events, and as well as we got the YMCA of Detroit reached out to us and said, hey, we're having a hard time with membership. Can we work with you to do some marketing videos? We've got people in classes and camps and various different functions at the YMCA using GoPro cameras to capture great footage, and we make them into these great, really digestible marketing videos.
We're soon running out of time, and I would like to ask you a question, and maybe that's going to generate some other comments. Since this is our first club, and this is our first club meeting, any advice on how to create a culture of entrepreneurship, and then how to sustain that culture on campus, when, if you think about it, our students get to stay with us a few years, and then they hopefully successfully take off, and then they start their businesses. So how do we create a culture of entrepreneurship?
So Venture for America's kind of unspoken mantra is don't be an asshole. And I mean that really seriously. Like, if you want to create a culture of entrepreneurship, then you have to accept a culture of failure. So when someone fails, it can't be, everyone points fingers and make fun of them, like, old TV shows like The Simpsons or something. It needs to be, okay, well, how can we improve on this? It needs to be a culture that really inspires innovation and inspires people to take risks and not be afraid to fail. And that totally starts on a college campus. I know I was not part of an entrepreneurship club or a program. I think they started the entrepreneurship program at Wesleyan the year I left. So I didn't even have the opportunity to be a part of business challenges and things like that. But had I been, I would hope that the community is welcoming enough that when I inevitably come up with a horrible idea that I think is amazing, that the people are willing to give me constructive feedback and not just kick me out the door and say, my idea sucks. So I think it really starts with the mentality of the people that surround you, of being welcoming and encouraging you to try, because it's better to try than to just not. It's always better to put your best foot forward and give it a go, even if the idea ends up not being very good.
I think what Dan's speaking to there is an incredible point. It's one that we started calling that it's yes and, that if anyone's taken an improv class before, you've heard this. When you hear an idea that you think is terrible, you don't say, no, here's why it won't work. You say yes, and here's how we can make it better. So I think there's, without a doubt, the emotional part of the ecosystem that has people that are willing to encourage each other constructively to continue to bring ideas to life. I mentioned in my case, if I hadn't moved to an ecosystem like Boston, I wouldn't have pulled the trigger. I was just, had been laughed out of so many rooms that, Atlanta, or where I grew up, didn't have this culture of entrepreneurship. So I think that's certainly important. The second piece that I might add on to that is the tactical piece. So I think it's stuff like this. But what I'd probably encourage is just to say that there's a lot of work, and maybe I'm talking to you, you got a lot on your shoulders. But to everybody here, there's a lot of work, I think, in creating that ecosystem. So I'm thinking about a lot of the things that made, for me, MIT and Boston special was kind of this venture mentoring service where they took people that had, a combination of people like the three of us, seasoned vets who failed and gotten back up and succeeded, and people that were newer to it, like Dan and I, and venture mentoring service brought those people together with people like you that were curious. Facebook groups, email lists. I can't think of the number of different elements of what it tactically means to have an ecosystem. So, and each one of those takes, planning, consideration, and execution. So what I'd say there is to build, the system that everybody here would like to have. There's a lot of hard work and planning that actually goes into making something like this happen over and over and over again, to where you're encouraging people to bring ideas to life in a physical form.
I would say you're fortunate that you have entrepreneurs among you. Yeah. You have Lisa Basil, whose photos are over there, and I understand Isaiah King is doing personal training. And so you've got people already who are combining an education and some entrepreneurship activity. I've always struggled with my main job and then my entrepreneurial instincts. And I would guess that all of you, your main job is to graduate from school, and you have certain disciplines you need to learn, and then you've got entrepreneurial interests. And to me, that's tricky, how you balance those two. The best thing is if you can find a teacher who combines entrepreneurship and along with your regular courses. So I think that's what you're creating here, is where that's possible. But I think if you can find a entrepreneurship activity that is small enough that it doesn't take over your life while you're getting a college education, that's a great way to train for entrepreneurship in the larger world once you're out after you've graduated.
And I think to go back to the ecosystem of Boston, for this particular community, you're in a really wonderful bed of entrepreneurship. And so take advantage of the resources that are already here and bring them to Lasell. Go to the meetups, the tech meetups, and meet someone interesting and then have them come talk here. There's so many things that you can be doing because of the access that you have. I can tell you that in Cincinnati, it is not that robust. We're working on it every day. We're trying to get those interesting people to come and consider Cincinnati as a place to work. We actually there's a company that's growing really quickly that just got this phenomenal IT guy to come and help build their infrastructure at the company, and we're already plugging him in to give talks to other IT people to help grow the community. So totally take advantage. You're not just limited to the campus. Reach out to Boston, and I promise you people will respond. It's a pretty welcoming community here.
Any other questions before we wrap this event? So I would like to thank you very much. We have a small gift for you, a very, very small gift. Rocky, maybe you want to help us with this. So I just want to show everybody. I thought that as a professor, the only thing I can give you is more homework. So I'm going to give you a notepad. And I found this great notepad that says everything begins with an idea. Dr. Muller said everything begins with a problem, starts with a problem. And every member here signed, and we would like to thank you very, very much. Hopefully the next $1 billion idea is going to be seated in this notepad. We would like to thank you so very much. I don't want you guys to leave because, like I said, we have, yes, it's one for each of you. I would like to ask you now to be a little bit entrepreneurial and help me move all these chairs somewhere in the back of the rooms. And we have a very special moment for you guys. I'm not going to introduce them. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. But before I do that, please have a round of applause for our outstanding guest. Thank you very much. All right.
Yeah, how's everybody doing out there? Y'all chilling? Why y'all laughing at me like I'm not playing? I'm serious. How y'all doing out there? Y'all good? Yeah. All right, cool. What up? Yo, my name is Juwan. They call me J-Man. This is my man D right here.
How y'all doing?
We got a little surprise for y'all. We're gonna spit a little something for y'all just to get y'all a little acclimated with the Entrepreneurship Club. You feel me?
Me and my man Jay here, we just prepared a little something like, some of y'all know us that, we spit a little bit, nothing too serious. But we just wanted to say a little something just to get y'all familiar with the club, get y'all acclimated with some of our associates here.
So if y'all could do me one favor, could you guys just clap? We don't have a beat, so y'all gonna be a beat. So could y'all just clap for me? Just like boom clap. Yeah, boom clap. All right, hit him with it.
Will you stop clap instead of just clap? So like a.
Okay.
All right. Ladies
Slow it
and
up a little
gentlemen,
bit.
boys and girls, we about to go on a journey around the world. First stop Vegas, black and red taste test. My bro, she on no dime, hooked it up, we built the latest. Fresh cut complete, onto my next feet. Checked into the wine, took a seat. Currency, my speakers, basil on my screen. If you need new art, hit Lisa with the green. Time to peel like a tangerine. Previous 2 stops got me so fresh and so clean. Diamond hooked it up, Dana hooked it up with the sparkles. Yeah, you know how we get it down, we don't, give me a second, I just freestyle a little bit. We going off the top, yeah, none of my rhymes a bit. Hi Sarah, how you doing today? Just to let y'all know that coming off the top of the head today. We talking about the business club, entrepreneurship and all of that, all the above. You know it's all love, everybody here got an idea. And I'm gonna be the speaker of the year. I'm about to pass it to my man J-Mans, he's about to hit you a little something, we got big old plans.
Alright, cool. Listen, if you want to train, baby, at that high intensity, hit up my man Izzy King, man, he got the remedy. No, I'm not talking fun under the sun, no shots of Hennessy, so when I spit the high heat, y'all can remember me. Now I'm going up north, toes in the sand, had to hit the Dirty Myrtle Surf Shop, my man. You know what I gotta do, learn to surf lessons. I keep falling off the board because it's for testing now. I'm cool, man, I messed around and got committed. I want to get my girl a ring, but I don't know where to go with it. Hit up SKO Bridal, they hold the title. You know what I gotta do, find a address so I read the Bible. Now I'm cool now, looking through the catalog, I'm like, oh my God, I'm about to get married, dog. Now I'm about to be in it, situation's rocky, I hit up Rocky, who's gonna stop me? I'm cool now, gotta get escaping, I'm about to hit my boy, hit up the Great Escape Inn. Going on this thing, I need a vacation, I'm about to stay forever, had to do a staycation. Thank everybody for coming out this evening, and you know what J-Mans, he be spitting, so y'all cannot believe in him. I want y'all to just go home now, listen to this rap, and listen real close. You understand J-Mans, he wanna brag, I never boast. Freestyle off the top, I come and spit the most, but that had nothing to do with it, but I'm doing it at the most. Yo, listen, Rocky the president, I'm the CEO, baby, and that was irrelevant. Listen, my company was Jam Studio. You understand we spit it, so now we gon' blow. Thank everybody for coming out. Just like, oh, hold on, my phone. I got you. I picked it back up, I messed up, but now I'm back. You know I'm about to do this thing when I be spitting on the track. Don't look at me like I had to come and fail, cause you know you had to succeed before you had to fail. Fail before you succeed, messing up the order, that's me. You know what I do when I'm spitting off that free. It's my boy, man, I'm rapping up on the stage. Now I had to do it, baby, now I'm off, it's all day. It's cool because I messed up a little bit. That was like no. But you know what though? I'll be on the radio tonight. You know what I'm saying?
Thank you so much for coming. We are setting up the food. Initially we had invited 32 people, had 60 signing up, had 27 asking for extra seats. So I know the food is delicious, but just think that we have much more people than we initially